Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. This is our second anniversary show. So I think it was, keep me honest, Gifford, October 7th, 6th? 6th. We hit 2 years going strong with the coalition and with the podcast. So what we wanted to do is get all the board members together and share, do a little bit of retrospecting about how the past year went and the year prior. So we're going to talk about some of our episodes that went well, some of our episodes that didn't. We're going to tell some funny stories about the stuff that happens behind the scenes, stuff that didn't make it onto the air for whatever reason, due to legal reasons or to professional reasons. And we're going to talk about probably some of the stuff that's coming up next year. So if you're listening along, I'm just going to have people introduce themselves as they go. And otherwise, if you're watching the video, you can see what all of us look like, which is probably a bit terrifying. So I'm going to go around the horn. I'm going to go around the horn, and I'm going to start with you, Paul. What episode from the past year stands out to you, either one you were on or one you listened to?
Past year, I believe one of my favorites was David Marquet. I dig his vibe. I like his little bites that he puts out in social media, and I was actually nervous when the cover art was being prototyped on the team. And Andy, you remember this, he had a parrot on his shoulder and an eye patch. And I'm like, for God's sakes, I mean, he commanded a submarine in the U.S. military. I mean, we've got to show some respect here. And you're like, no, he's cool. And then I find out, yeah, he is cool about it. And I didn't know that about him. And that was cool to discover. So.
How about you, Merman?
I loved the interview that Colleen and I got to do with the two Jeffs, Jeff Patton and Jeff Gotelf, which I don't even know if I'm still pronouncing his name properly. I tried even practicing it, and so I won't make fun. It's like the TH is like Gotelf, and I know that that's not correct either. But anyway, they wouldn't go by Jeff. They wouldn't go by their last name. And so we had to say both their first and their last name. And I was terrified of asking any question, right, to not Jeff Patton, right? Basically is what I will say is not Jeff Patton. But like names aside, it was just the most amazing conversation of like, I just started asking questions, and it's one time Jeff Patton goes, dude, are you wanting us to like give the entire training to you right now? And I'm like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Like, I kind of want that too. It was such a fun conversation.
How about you, Andy Clef?
Favorite episode has to be our April 1st Fragile Manifesto. Troy and Leff and I spun it up. That was a lot of fun. And we get some comments online where people kind of missed the publication date, and they're like, this is inappropriate, guys. Like, have you been listening for a while, or are you a first timer?
Don't we get that feedback often from our podcast? Like, this is inappropriate.
A fair amount. We had a lot of people, too inside baseball is one of the common complaints we hear. We also hear, well, what about the profanity? Well, we're not trying to be Sesame Street. I mean, we're adults. So if a curse word offends you, well, we got bigger problems. Troy, favorite episode?
I would say favorite episode I was a part of, I really enjoyed doing the mob programming 2-part series with Woody Zool. That was a highlight for me personally. As far as one I wasn't a part of, probably anything with Dan Vicanti. So that's what I'll say.
Your spirit animal.
Yeah.
Colleen.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Troy on that one. My favorite probably that we recorded that I was a part of was when we got to interview Dan Vicanti, and when he dropped his size doesn't matter line, which I actually referenced at training at my husband's company, and he was not as appreciative of that joke coming from me.
Lighten up, Colleen's man.
And And then my favorite episode that I was not a part of would have probably been Andy Fleming with Andy Clough on the deliberately developmental organizations. It was just really different and kind of outside of the sphere of what we usually talk about as, from an Agile perspective. And I just really enjoyed listening to what Andy talked about in terms of kind of the big picture from an organizational change perspective.
How about you, Brad?
Personal favorite would have to be the David Allen podcast. I mean, how often does a schlep like me get to talk to somebody that's international bestseller? Not that often. So that was pretty fun. And he was so entertaining as well. Man could talk underwater and had stories to match.
Don't sell
That was
yourself
really cool.
short, Brad. You're the coolest schlub from Australia that I know. You're from Australia, right? Or New Zealand?
Yes,
Don't say New Zealand. Don't say New Zealand.
Dang it. You're from
definitely
South
Australia.
Africa, right? South Africa. I knew it.
No, I think, isn't that a British accent?
Oh, it's just going to get worse from here on out, kids.
It definitely is.
Gifford, favorite from last year.
It's a struggle. There were so many freaking episodes that were just awesome. I mean, I think, because it was out of the norm for us, my top three, because I really can't get away from the top three. Troy blew my mind twice with some of the Cantor model stuff and the spiral dynamics and even the integral theories. You tie all three of those together. I spent like 3 weeks with my brain exploded.
He does that every podcast.
Every time
He
Troy's
does.
on, I said it last episode. Every time Troy's on, it's another fucking $50 book I gotta buy.
Mr. Complexity Theory on. So
it's at the point where if like Troy's volunteering to be on a podcast, I'm like, why am I even here? Like that's I just let him go. He's so fucking smart.
Lef, favorite? One that stands out?
I have to go back. There's a couple. One where one of our former maybe OGs was in an Uber doing a podcast that was quite entertaining. And I think...
And I was pretending to be McCalla?
Yeah, pretty much.
Hey guys, it's Mike McCalla.
And I think one of the other ones was during whatever the 12 Days of Agile, which may or may not have been our best work, but is when Andy Clough found his like smooth jazz kind of commentator, moderator voice that just was amazing. It was truly
everything
awesome.
was everything from Andy was.
It was great. It was great.
I stand by the 12 Days of Agile. I will defend that series to the grave. It may not have come off the smoothest, but I loved the conversation we had.
And we should get SEU, listening credits for everybody updating this. So it's not not just for the Manifesto series. You get it for the 12 Days of Agile.
Yeah, but I also like the Lisa Atkins podcast. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I think the 12 Days of Agile, and I think we finished that right before Brad joined us. And I think Brad, one of our first board meetings, asked, "Are you guys going to do that again?" And we all unanimously said, "Well, fuck no."
No, we're good.
People don't. I mean, if you don't do a podcast, the work that goes into it, the scheduling, the mastering, the artwork, all that stuff. I mean, it was a monumental effort. We put in. You think about it, all of us put in a good solid 5 weeks worth of work from the beginning of November right up until the second week of December, and then we finally just said, "Okay, we're good for the year." But that was a rough slog.
It
I
literally
love that.
nonstop.
I love that Drew brought up the Lisa Atkins podcast. There's a lot of ancillary pieces of that podcast that were actually really kind of a big deal. It was her first public kind of speaking since the acquisition of ACI into Accenture. She hadn't really spoken since then. And SIQ had been wanting, and I know this is because we worked there, right? SIQ had been wanting her to kind of speak on it for a bit anyways, because she has a great relationship with Andy, like who doesn't? He kind of coaxed her into it. And then also she started out by saying, "Hey, I'm a reform project manager and I used to manipulate people to get things done. And I had to take a break from work because I felt guilty from manipulating people." Like she started the podcast off that way. And I was like, I don't know what we were about to talk about, but I want to spend the next 45 minutes only on that piece. And I just kept pressing on that nerve for a bit until everybody else was like, shut up, like we need to move on. I'm like, no, this is so awesome. Anyway, that was a really incredible podcast. And I'm so proud of us for doing it.
That was a great one. And I think on that one, she mentioned that she would not have met, stuck with, and married her husband had it not been for Agile Transformation. And I don't know if we did that on air or if it's afterwards. And they were like, yeah, that's our Valentine's Day podcast. You too.
Yes, it was. Yes,
Right?
it was.
And,
Yeah, there was a lot of behind the scenes of her career that I've heard her speak many times. I've never heard the stuff she told us on the podcast.
But I feel like, and I don't mean to veer off on a separate path, but we've gotten a lot of those sound bites from people that speak publicly, that go to, that do the conferences and so forth. But on the podcast, like even Dean, when he was talking about SAFE, offered tidbits and sound bites that he doesn't normally talk about. So I think it's interesting that there's a level of comfort that people feel, or maybe they just feel they want to get something out that they don't feel comfortable doing elsewhere on this particular platform, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
I think it shifts the conversation from I'm preaching at you to I'm just having a chat. And chats, conversations, we facilitate them all the time in our work environments because we know conversations work better than meetings because you get that offhand stuff.
Yeah.
When we're not the most behaved and we start, using the profanity and I'm speaking for all of us, I'm pretty sure, right? And so
I'm a sweet
you're
angel.
just having a conversation, right?
Right. Last one in the rotation, Jason Cusack. What are your thoughts? What episode 6 out for you this year?
The one episode I loved the most was when you guys all blew me off for book club, and I had to talk to Dafia for 2 hours by myself. You guys remember that? We never released anything.
Oh,
Nope.
ouch!
Yeah.
Ooh,
Kicks.
that hurt.
No, I'm kidding. That really did happen. But I think my favorite was the last one we did in person. The last one I did in person with Merman, which was the off-the-cuff Agile DC one we did about a year ago.
Yeah.
Myself, Colleen, Gifford, and Merman. And I don't even remember what we talked about. I just remember having the best time after the conference, just chatting with everyone before they took off.
It was like the state of Agile conferences, like where we felt like Agile conferences were going.
I don't think we ever released that one either, did we?
No.
It's half.
Did we not?
It's literally.
We never did.
No.
No, there's Gifford made a remark about the outtakes channel we need to post where we can just throw stuff up there for like his drunken rant at our in-person in PA.
Oh, that's out there. That is live. That is literally available on the code.
How is that live, but our DC podcast was not?
It's on a computer that died, and so now I have to reclaim it from the hard drive and get it back on. It died halfway through editing.
I think for me, so we had a lot of good episodes this past year, if I wanted to hem it into this year. The one that sticks out of me was Andy Kleff's interview on July 4th with Professor Dave Snowden. We've had so many amazing guests this year. Like I've talked to people that I never, which we'll talk to in a second. I've talked to people I never thought I would ever come across. But that was, out of all the podcasts we've done, it's the only one I've listened to multiple times where I actually had to slow it down to like 0.7 or 0.8 because I was actually writing down like stuff Dave was saying, and I have it actually printed up in my desk at work, and I reference it all the time. His accent was a bit to get my head wrapped around, right? But just every other line he said, you could literally turn that into a white paper or a conference talk. Just every other thing he said, and it was pretty wild to listen to him. And you could tell he was going off the cuff. He was just riffing. It wasn't planned out like I'm about to read from a prepared statement. So that was for me that was wild. Okay, so the next
one of my favorite pieces about that podcast is I respect Dave Snowden like to a level that I cannot even fathom. And I was actually supposed to pair with Andy on that podcast, and I honestly don't remember what happened, but whether it was in the morning or evening, I honestly don't remember. But something happened, and I think I fell asleep or something. It was some weird random day kind of a thing.
Merman, you're from Texas. It was July 4th. I guarantee you had guns out and you were drinking Coors Light while riding the back of a horse.
America.
The flag. Guarantee.
America.
America. America.
What I'm saying is that I like my biggest regret of the last year is not being on that fucking podcast with Dave Snowden. I wanted nothing more to do it. And I remember just like going, Andy, I'm so sorry. He's like, no, it's fine. And I totally missed out on the greatest podcast.
So next topic. So by the way, for our listeners, you can tell if you look at the chronological order that we release stuff when someone has a bug in their ear. For example, Andy Clef went on a tear at the beginning of this year where we did a lot of stuff around organizational behavior, organizational transformation, culture, psychology. Troy went off the deep end with the Troy module. It was all, William Stridham came in. They talked about integral theory and Cantor and spiral dynamics. Brad had a run where he did 3 or 4 episodes. So it's from the outside looking in, and I had people say this to me, you can tell when someone has a topic that they're passionate about because we'll bang out 4 or 5 episodes in a row, all basically centered on the same theme. So while we're talking about that, what were some of your surprises or things that didn't go well? Nightmares this year. And I'm going to go first. For me, and I hope she's listening, but I sort of hope she's not listening. When I interviewed Karen Martin for Value Stream Mapping, this was my first time ever doing a solo interview. And it was just, I never realized how hectic it is trying to pay attention to what someone is saying, pay attention to the time, note your agenda, note the topics you want to cover off, and then but also stay engaged and keep the conversation running. When I went back and listened to it, I thought it came out okay, but going through it, I was like, Ted Stryker in Airplane, the water is coming down my face, and I'm like, picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. Like I was stressed out the wazoo. But I never realized, so kudos to you, Andy, and to Troy who do those solo episodes. I don't know how you guys do it because for me it was almost cognitive overload.
Yep.
Colleen, I cut you off.
Oh, I thought you were going to say our KMM one. That one.
I was in KMM.
Yeah, we finally got David Anderson and we got Teodora Bozeva.
Bozeva. Yep.
Yeah, and they were both in Spain, I think, at the time, and so it took a lot of work to get this on their calendar to talk about the new Kanban maturity model book, and none of David's audio recorded correctly, so we had all these weird pauses where it was us talking, and then Teodora would answer something, and then we'd say, "How about you, David?" And it was just dead space, and we couldn't recover that audio and had to redo the whole thing, but we got it back out, so.
And that was the death of Zencaster.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
It was.
that was the last straw for that one.
Final straw.
I didn't know what y'all were talking about until you said KMM, and then immediately I just had Vietnam flashbacks.
Yeah.
Maturity model. Haven't you understand that?
Or when we did our first pass at Let the Meet Points, the episode that just came out, which is coaching snobbery. We did a whole episode. Most of us have been, let's be honest, most of us have been drinking probably a little bit too much. Whole episode came out okay, and then when the audio mixed down, Merman came out like he was doing amyl poppers and cocaine because his audio track was completely
It had nothing to do with what I was on, for the record.
This is the post-production screw up.
It has nothing to do with that. I was on hotel Wi-Fi.
And I tried, and that was, for our listeners, that was the one week where we had to apologize and say we goofed and we didn't have a new episode because I tried to recover it, and the more I tried listening to Merman talking about this, so what we talking about it, forget it. It was toast. And actually, that ended up being serendipity because we re-recorded and we ended up with a much better episode.
It was way better, mainly because Troy was involved the second time around.
Mm.
But it just went in a completely different direction as well.
Yeah.
But it's like that. You add Troy or Andy to an episode, the episode number just lifts that little bit.
Yeah, so is Gifford the opposite effect where you add Gifford to it and it immediately goes downhill?
Yeah.
I'll let Giff answer that one.
Yeah, something's guaranteed to fall on the floor if we've got GIF on and we're recording. It's like the minute it's quiet, a book, a kid, something hits the floor.
A train set.
A train.
Loud.
I will say this about James, though, that his podcast on the 5 metrics for creating safety and high performing teams.
Yeah.
To this day, I still use that at clients. Those metrics, the same talk. I basically stole this right from Jim. Thank you so much.
Got it on tape now.
And that was from the same conference that we recorded the podcast that never made it off the bridge to Terabithia. So.
But somehow the podcast where you, me, and Colleen were on a riverboat in Pittsburgh, that made it off the ground.
Well,
that was either.
That was the second live recording, and ironically, if we had to talk about something that we failed at pretty righteously, would have been the 3 episodes I did at San Diego. And, we changed. So that, to be honest, that is literally, we've done 4 live recordings, and every single time the equipment is completely changed because I tried something and I hated it, and then I bought something new. And then the last time I used that setup was in Agile DC when I recorded my talk that Troy mentioned and Cusack. So, I mean, literally, I'm sitting there at the table at the tequila bar, and I honestly don't know how much I had to drink by the time I showed up to that. I was hanging out with Bonneker in another hotel.
But I mean, I think those weren't terrible. They just weren't as clear and clean as if you were in an audio isolated room. But I mean, there was still some good content there.
Good content, right.
I forgot how to get the equipment started. So the very first one that we released last that we had the apology on, I totally spaced. I started messing up the recording, and Merm just instantly jump in with his razor sharp daggers to stab me in the neck and make fun of me. And so I put the thing on pause, and then we re-record the darn intro. We missed 10 or 2 minutes of awesome content, and then I finally get it started, and then luckily it was at a point where Erica had kind of actually started talking, and I realized I had paused it. And it was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Nobody else knew except for me. And then I'm walking away going, Andy, I totally screwed that up.
Confessional time. What else? Yeah. So we were talking about Snowden's podcast. That was the second or possibly third attempt to get him on the air. And I was so glad it came through, because the first time he was running late, and I get an email. The car broke down. I'm on the way from airport to hotel. Call you in 20 minutes. And he calls from his car, and he's driving, and he wants to continue the podcast. And I'm like, okay. Wi-Fi kept breaking up, and finally convinced him that we should reschedule. And it was maybe a month out. But God, how many times did we drop a planned episode because either somebody didn't show up or?
Yeah, I mean, also look at the times where we're recording at all weird hours. I mean, Lef and I had we recorded, what was it, Jurgen with agility skills at 3 a.m. his time. You could tell towards the end he was getting tired. Brad being on the other side of the earth is flat, so we don't really say the other side.
We have time for that now.
Even
on my quadrant of the earth.
Brad's in a totally different time zone. He's in the future. So
well, that was last week. It was 11 o'clock at night. That one started on a Friday.
My favorite was on the I don't know, I just sound like I'm completely talking about the 2 Jeffs podcasts, but in that particular one, we recorded it at Colleen, 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning, just to meet because they were in Europe at the time, and so they were sitting next to each other in front of a computer. Colleen's an hour behind me, and I'm in the middle of my work day. I'm on site with the client, and I'm on their awful Wi-Fi, and I've got my AirPods in, and for some strange reason, because of the internet, there's a delay. So when I speak, there's probably a good second or second and a half delay in what's said, and so I'm hearing myself as I'm talking, and I'm trying to not sound like an idiot, because I've got my own
nice recovery, by the way,
repeating in my head. Well, that's we don't want to say that word. We run into those issues all the time where, due to technology, I mean, everybody thinks that recording podcasts are just super easy, but all the time, because of internet issues, a lot of us travel for work. And so we're dealing with either hotel Wi-Fi or weird connection issues, or the guest has connection issues. And so for some strange reason, like, it just sounds weird. And so communication is not like us sitting across from each other, which is weird because
was also hard because they were together. So the fact that they were in the room together, they could see each other. And I felt like we kept cutting in when they were trying to talk because we couldn't see their language or their interactions with each other in the same room. So that was kind of an interesting experience to have two people.
Here's a question. How often has editing saved you? Because I know when I get my hands on the edit, I cut out spaces and all sorts of weird endings and little bits, or lead an entire podcast with the ending of our song, do, as the case may be.
You can do some fancy stuff with editing, but I listen to other podcasts to get some inspiration, and then some of the ones I listen to at the end, they go, and we'd like to thank the following 12 people for producing the show. So-and-so wrote the scores, and it's like, well, shit, that must be nice. It's us putting this stuff together on top of full-time demanding jobs. So, to go in there and cut out the ums and ahs, and I've done it too, it can take 3 hours to do a 45-minute episode.
I don't know about you all, but I don't think that cutting all that stuff out is really even that necessary some of the times. And I say that as someone that says, I say every time that I'm trying to start a sentence. So whoever's trying to edit my shit is ridiculous, as I just said.
No,
right?
See, I think it's not so much about the cutting out the ums and the ahs. They're natural parts of speech. We do them very naturally. What I try to kill are unnatural silences, because sometimes you might hand back to someone and it takes them a few seconds to get. If you're face-to-face, you wouldn't have the pause, and it sounds unnatural, so I try to get rid of those spaces. Some of us occasionally, and I'm in this lift, we'll occasionally lick our lips, and it makes quite an ugly sound when you're listening to it, so I like killing those.
Should we all do
whatever, as you breathe in. So you kill those, but, every and nah.
Well, we've had some heavy mouth breathers on the podcast when we've been recording it. For an entire episode, it's like.
Well, the other thing that people don't realize
is talking, and you're like, "Oh my god, just stop breathing into the microphone."
The differences between someone calling in versus using I see Andy Clef has the snowball, versus using your onboard computer mic versus calling in from a cell phone versus trying to do it in person. It makes it that much more difficult to try and mix it down and to get it right. When we first started using Ringer, which is the tool we use a lot now, I don't think any of us realized that the microphones were so sensitive. So if you have a headset in with a mic that's hanging off a cable and it rubs against your shirt, it sounds like you're literally dragging sandpaper down the microphone. So
yeah, but I don't think there's any question that this is a lot of work. But I don't know. For one, I don't complain. I mean, we do this because we enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it's
hell yeah.
I can't believe how much I've learned just from the interaction and experience. Right? And just talking and just having the community that we've created, in the sense of just being able to share success or failure and get some guidance. Right? We've got a group of talented individuals here. That was sort of part of this, was to be able to share that out, to build that community. And it's been happening.
Yeah, here.
Well, 121 episodes later. I mean,
Well,
have we talked about how this all started? Well,
we talked about that in the first anniversary.
Yeah, last year's anniversary show. So I'm going to ask everybody.
Go on, Andy. We'd all been out eating salad together.
Yes, and meditating, and we were attention. Hot yoga.
That's the version I heard.
Hot yoga.
That's not what I heard.
Well, I mean, we did. I don't know if Colleen's backstory. We actually were stalking her at Agile Camp that year up in Newark. I know they like to say it's in Metro to make it think you're in New York, but it's not. It's Newark, New Jersey, in the hood.
So I don't know if I'd say we were stalking her. That might be not a good thing to say.
I got the story from Colleen a week or two ago. She came and taught a Kanban class in Atlanta, and I think she used the word stalking. I mean,
I got some
in the perception.
Right.
Where were you going, Jay?
I'm gonna give a little bit of a left turn. So white whale. So I'll start with you, Andy Clef, because you were asking if you could get one guest right? If you get a golden ticket to turn around, you can show up at someone's doorstep and say, I get to interview you for our podcast, and they can't say no. They have to do it. Who would it be?
There's college.
Yeah, I'm a little bored.
I got to pass and let my brain think for a minute.
Dan Pink. You got to go Dan Pink.
Dan Pink would be good.
I vote Ryan Lochte.
Simon Sinek. Would that be fun?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Paul?
I'll go Tony Robbins if we're gonna, do this kind of stuff here.
I don't know if his giant hands could fit on the podcast, right? You ever see those things?
No.
He had a pituitary gland issue.
Yeah, he has Marfan
He's
or
got a
minor
pretty
Marfan.
incredible backstory. Didn't come from anything. I like Tony Robbins anyway.
Yeah. Gifford.
I got kicked out. I don't know what the heck happened. Where did I leave off in my
Who's your white whale? If you could invite anybody onto the podcast, who would be your white whale catch?
freaking Kent Beck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't been. He just won't do it, man. So
I scared him away last time we got close.
we got close, and Captain Ahab there, Paul Elia.
I was fanboying too much.
It happens. Merman?
Did nobody hear my Ryan Lochte joke I made earlier about?
Yes.
We ignored it.
We heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fine. You know what?
We ignored.
So, serious answer is Mike Cohn. He doesn't do podcasts, and he taught my CSM and CSPO classes. So I have a relationship with Mike, but because his life is literally just training all the live long day, even when he comes to town. Like now that I'm a trainer, I know how hard it is to get in, just to connect with people in the community. And I just want to pick his brain. I want him like a couple drinks in, so he's like got no inhibitions, and just go like, no, seriously, like dig up all the skeletons. Like what the fuck happened, right? Because he's an OG.
He's been very generous over the years with just one-off questions. I want to throw that shout out. I've never paid to take a class from him, but he's always been extremely cool with, hey, I asked him one time about Scrum Bond. He's like, hey, think about it. And he took time answering the question.
He's one of the true good guys in the community. I'm a huge fan of his, not just because I've taken classes from him, but just he cares about the beauty and the majesty of Scrum, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. But the challenge is that he just doesn't speak at conferences anymore. He doesn't do podcasts. I mean, he's invested in Mountain Eagle or Mountain Goat Agile, right? So
Mountain Goat.
Yeah, so he just doesn't have a lot of time for anything else, right?
If you take his class, because I've taken a bunch of his courses, and he hosts a call a couple times a month, or maybe once a month, I forget what it is, that engages with the community. I know you have to take his class to get that opened up, but it's a great forum. I mean, he really does try and stay connected to some degree, right? It's an open forum. It's almost like I wouldn't say like a lean coffee, but it's a Q&A.
Yeah.
Nice.
Troy, white whale.
Well, I got one that I want to say. Before I say that, though, I will say this about Kent Beck. So they asked me to speak for an hour at PI Planning at my most recent client.
Hey, if you're not mute.
I didn't say who it was.
Not you, Troy. Keep going.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So basically, I put together a deck, and my first slide was about the whole deck was about delivering value, and I started off with a picture of Kent Beck, and I said, I have $5 to any. It was 120 people in the room. Anybody who could tell me this man is, and no one got it. So I felt very depressed by that. So basically, Kent Beck, if you're listening, I think you need to be more known in the world for all your contributions.
We got $5 for you. Yeah, we got $5 for you.
Yeah, okay.
He did a nice video cast not that long ago. It was awesome.
Okay. So we got to try it. Maybe we'll try again. Maybe we'll see what we can do.
Link in the show notes.
Andrew left. Troy, finish.
I didn't say for me, though.
Sorry.
I have a story about stalking someone for this. My white whale is a guy named, you guys probably won't know him, but a guy named Dom D'Agostino. And I'm trying to put together this biohacking series. And he's the guy that was like #1 on my list. I have emailed him, Twittered him, Facebooked him. I've commented on his YouTube videos. He went live on a Facebook Live one time. While he was talking, I'm commenting on it. Please read my podcast email. Like I sent him all this stuff. Anyway, I can't get him. So if you're interested in that, you can Google his name, Don D'Agostino. So anyway, so that was my white whale. Still going.
Andrew Leff.
I don't know if I have a white whale. I know who we went through when we were doing the manifesto series that said no. So I don't know if I'd consider them the white whale more than just wish they would have participated. But, you know, I would love to get on a podcast. You guys will chuckle, but like Zig Ziglar or John Maxwell. That would probably be one of
John Maxwell would be amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Can you do Zig Ziglar anymore? I thought he passed away, or am I wrong?
I'll bring him back from the dead.
His son now runs the organization.
Abraham Lincoln. I vote Abraham Lincoln.
Elon Musk. Elon Musk will find a way to reincarnate him. Colleen.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's anybody, I've got to pick Jon Stewart along that same vein.
Okay.
No, I actually think it would be really interesting to talk to the Heath brothers who did Make It Stick.
Dan and Chris.
Made to Stick.
Okay.
Dan and Heath. Dan and Chip Heath, I think are their names. I saw one of them speak at a conference, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And just really interesting concepts around change. And, you know, at the end of the day, everything that we do is trying to get other people to change their behavior. So I think that'd be kind of a fascinating connection back to what we're doing every day with our clients and with our teams.
Cool. Brad?
I have to say I probably have 3 that I'd really like to happen. They're all ancillary to Agile. I'd say Dan Pink. I can't get past his publicist. I want that conversation. The other one, which is a little bit off left of center, is Ron Johnson, the guy that wrote the psychopath test. Also, man,
John Ronson. So you've been shamed on the internet? Yeah.
Yeah. So I am waiting for him to come available again because he's off writing and that sort of thing. But he's definitely on my list. The other one, which I've kind of started but haven't had time to follow up, is I want a game developer embedded in Wizards of the Coast. Somebody actually doing the game development stuff, because they do cycles that last a lot longer than ours, but they still have to respond to the markets because they start their planning 5 years ahead of the time. They start development for the release 18 months ahead of the time, but they still have to be listening to the market almost all the way up to release. So I think that'd be an incredible conversation.
That would be pretty wild. John Ronson, but funny anecdote, he did his own podcast series for Audible titled The Butterfly Effect, which is the rise of internet porn and how it impacted the industry. The reason why I bring it up is the way with his accent, he says the word porn. Whenever I read it now, John Ronson, if you're listening, I can't help but hear you in my head. It's porn, like almost like porn, almost like John Lennon, right? Like porn.
Let's redirect here.
Yeah, horrible redirect.
This is what gets some of the viewer mail.
I literally can just see just having a stroke right now, and I'm going to get 18 pings like, dude. What is Jay? Like, stop.
Jay, what are you doing?
So I'm gonna let Cusack go, and then I'm gonna go, and then we got to loop back to Andy and Cusack, white whale.
So I have a quick 3. Joe Rogan, if I get to interview anybody, I just think he would be amazing.
Yeah.
So many cool stories from that dude. But on the Agile front, probably a little bit different. Stanley McChrystal. He was General McChrystal was a guy that wrote Team of Teams and My Share of the Task, and those are 2 of my favorite books. A ton of respect for that man, what he's done in the military, but he would be certainly on my whale list. And if we're bringing people back to life, Mike Beadle has to be on it too.
Yeah, good call out. Jeez, how do we go from that one? Andy Clef.
Brene Brown.
Yes.
Don't know. Explain.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's a whole podcast in itself. Okay, you asked for it. She had a wonderful TED Talk that went viral maybe 10 years ago about vulnerability. She was a pure data researcher, and she just had these revelations that cast her into the limelight, and she's continued on that vein. She has a couple other books out. There's another one. It's just about courage and vulnerability and the things that, as you said, Colleen, we deal with every day. You know, stepping out of your comfort zone, being afraid to fail, being afraid to stand alone and doing it anyway. She's a very passionate voice. You know, I sometimes feel a lot of us are out in the wilderness looking for kindred spirits, and she's one that
Yes.
You know, whispers in the wind.
She's in that same David Marquet area of like, she should be like honorarily like adopted into the Agile community, even though she's not necessarily an Agilist.
Yeah.
Just the concept she speaks of, just that it's our crowd, right?
Yeah.
Paul, did I go to you?
I wished Tony Robbins.
Oh, Tony Robbins. Yes. Okay, so I guess that leaves me last. So my white whale for me has to be Nassim Taleb. Has to be Nassim Taleb.
Good one.
Love to get him on. His books, The Black Swan, is one of the hardest books I've ever read in my life, and everybody knows I read a lot, and yet so rewarding. And he's a great follow on Twitter, because if you say something stupid to him, he's going to go back and he will, you know, they'd say, you know, don't wrestle with a pig in the mud, because they don't wrestle with someone stupid because they bring you down to their level and they beat you with experience. He actually brings you up to his level of intelligence and then beats you with his knowledge. And he's just a brilliant, brilliant guy to follow. He's one of those guys where I would love to have on. And I'm disappointed Cusack didn't say any sports reference. I was waiting for him to say, yeah, I would like to, you know, interview Gritty, the new Flyers mascot that looks like a meth head from Kensington. Like, you know, I was really hoping that was what we were going to get, but disappointed.
Show, I interviewed him last week. Of that
The show's in the can.
What's his voice sound like?
Like Animal from the Muppets.
So wrapping it up, last couple questions. Any funny memories, funny outtakes, disasters? We sort of talked about things that we were surprised by and things that didn't go well. Anything that really was bananas that you were just totally like verklempt by? Anybody?
Yeah, we had a fun one with Lisa Adkins. Sorry, Paul. So we normally ask either at the beginning or the end. We say, you know, could you record a blooper or a bookend for us, a bumper for us? And she said there was this awkward silence, and then she laughed. What's a bumper? And I think we kept that in. We put it as a blooper in our podcast because her laugh is just so pure and infectious. Yeah, Lisa, can you do a bumper for us? Sure. What's a bumper?
Gifford, anything stand out at you?
I mean, if I could go back in time to the Scrum Guide episode and take out the whole section about wiping people's asses, and
I remember that.
And not any of the if I can go back and recant some of my potty humor and make sure that never made it into existence, I probably would do that.
Just that one time, or for all of the times?
Well, and then after that, it was just like a running thing. So that if I would have deleted that event, then the whole toilet paper rants. People.
But I do think, in all honesty, though, I think that's where we get some of our listeners from, because I've had people come up to me and say, you guys are completely inappropriate, and I never know which way the conversation is going to go. But that's what makes it interesting, because sometimes you'll get someone on and you'll be totally serious and there'll be no profanity, and you can tell you're marching to an end state. And then there's other times where it's four of you, and I'm not sure if you're in the same room, the same bar, or even drinking at all, and it goes way off the rails real quickly. There's one episode, the guests will remain nameless, but we had an episode where you could tell that no one was having a good time. And I didn't know this until afterwards when I went back and started pinging around through email, like, hey, how did that interview go? But there was one or two guests that we've had where you could tell that they weren't into it. and they were out of their comfort zone. And you could tell the interviewees were really trying to pull the conversation out of this person, and it just was not happening. They were getting blood from a stone, and that blood was not coming. So for me, that was almost like a cringe episode where I was, ooh, that didn't go well.
It's so funny. Like, so we've done, Gifford made a reference to, we've done very few live podcasts, and honestly, we don't get to hang out in person a whole lot. For you listeners and viewers, we don't get to see each other very often and hang out very often, and most of the time it's via video chat, just because we're so distributed. But when we are together, like, you can tell we're AUers, right? Like, there's just something about the crew that we're just I remember the one we did on the riverboat in Pittsburgh. Colleen goes, "Hey, why don't we do a shot and then a drink, and then we'll do the podcast?" And she just runs, and before she even asks, she just walks to the bar and comes back with like her hands full of concoctions of things. I didn't ask what they were. It's just pure stuff.
It was Jim Beam and Yinglings.
I don't like that exactly what we drank.
With a hint of Stolies, you could just tell a little whiff.
Like, the fact that over a year ago what we drank causes concern in my voice.
I can tell you, Merman. I can tell you in extreme detail the events of that weekend and how fast that bottle of Double Oaked Woodford went down.
Oh my God, that Woodford! There were things that happened.
It's one of those weird things that my brain does.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know. I think that. So Paul, to your point, I think that there's something about just this crew, and I think people that participate in this community, that there's just something about AUers that just comes through in who we are. I don't know if you all agree or disagree.
No, I would agree. I think, and some of the people that I've had reach out to me through work or through other places have said, "Oh, I love listening to you guys because I feel like I'm in the room with you, because you don't put on airs. We don't come across as pretentious. If anything, we come across like barely chained sociopaths." Except Troy. Yeah, he's the one of us who's going to be president next. But yeah, how do I recover from that one? But yeah, it's yeah.
He just died.
Speaking of never meeting anybody in person, I mean, we're gonna have to find the next time Brad's in country, and then I'll fly out and meet him.
We missed him in Philly, and I know Brad's coming up on a time window, so why don't we kind of let him chime in now?
Look, honestly, anytime my brain shuts down while recording is something that I want to forget, and it happens. It's like, oh, I'm so glad I have an edit. I started off the last recording that we did, which was on Friday, with a raspberry, because I went to say something and it just went. It was like, "Hi, welcome to the Agile."
We've all done that.
Let's go again.
That's every podcast.
I think I did an intro where I introduced the co-hosts and the interviewees. I think it might have been Melissa and Matt's podcast, Melissa Perry and Matt Barcombe. And then when I went back and listened to it, I never introduced myself.
We all do that.
I screwed up Mary Pokendick's introduction 3 times.
Oh my God.
And Jay still can't say Kirievsky, right?
Oh, I asked him. We talked about that last year. I asked him before the podcast. It's Kirievsky, right? And then I came on and I butchered it.
Khrushchevsky, right?
Khrushchevsky, like those cookies, right? Like, yeah.
You like cookies?
All right, so we're gonna take this one home with one final question. What are you looking forward to in the coming 12 months? Not year. 12 months, because it's October. We got another 12 months ahead of us. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up, at least how my screen is laid out. Mr. Cusack, you get to go first.
Ooh, man, that's tough. So I think I would love to see in a smooth jazz Andy Clef and the McCalla, the fake McCalla do a podcast together.
I think we can arrange
I'll be
that.
more than glad
I don't
to
know
do
why it makes me laugh. But it just makes me laugh.
It all depends. It depends. You know, honestly, it depends.
Definitely, this one was inside baseball.
And maybe we can speed up Merman's voice too, and get that as like a special guest on that podcast. That'd be amazing.
Troy, coming year.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to in the coming year?
Well, I'm really trying to get this freaking biohacking thing off the ground. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm still working on it.
Nice.
I believe it's the missing piece in all this. It is the human brain. So that's what I'm working on.
Lef?
Just to be alive for 12 more months would be great.
It's overrated.
Looking forward to that, maybe. No, I don't have any one particular thing. I'm looking forward to continuing. So,
Mr. Gifford.
Mr. Gifford. In the next 12 months, I mean, you're right. We do get things in our crawl, and right now, all things leadership and moving the frozen middle is my thing. So, I expect to do some series on that. I've been working on the Long Island Iced Tea of Leadership, which is a mashup of a bunch of different leadership elements that you wouldn't think fit together, but in reality, they all do blend together and they tie. Really, in their tie points are people and clarity, and making sure that your people have the skills that need it. And so I plan on doing some writing and talking about the Long Island Iced Tea of leadership.
As long as
Someone
you
like Gifford to make a liquor reference.
Yep, just leave out the toilet paper references.
Yeah, that's unlike him.
Does it come with Pedialyte gift?
It does. Pedialyte, folks, greatest conference gift ever, and now it comes in a powder.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome for that.
This show's sponsored
Yes,
by.
that's travel.
Andy Club. This show is sponsored by Adult Pedialyte for when the morning after is worse than the night before.
It's
Call
not adult.
Gatorade.
By the way,
Convenient chewables.
by the way, different. When
Gatorade.
you mix the Pedialyte in vodka, it sort of negates it.
It's
letting
called
you
Gatorade.
Actually, that doesn't work, Jay. I've tried it.
Brad Stokes, coming 12 months.
Coming 12 months, doubling the number of listeners would be fantastic. Actually getting around to writing Rise Up and Retro and using the stuff that we've got on the coalition into some form of book form. That's my next 12 months. That I really want to do because retros are so overlooked, but they're so bloody important as well. And other than that, just more great conversations. Great conversations with you guys, great conversations with people that we bring in that blow our collective minds.
Colleen.
I know we've been batting around the idea of doing another Kanban talk around some of the things that people think they're doing that are Kanban that really aren't. So I'm excited to do that. And then I'm about to kick off kind of a personal Kanban boot camp program for teams. And so I think it'd be fun to invite people who've gone through some stuff like that onto the show to share their stories about how painful I am to work with, or how much they've gotten out of that program, or both.
Merman.
Man, trying to set aside the jokey answer. I think that I love Troy where he's going with this in terms of saying like, what are the fringe edges of what the manifesto and the principles kind of say, and like how do we apply them to our lives. I find myself less often writing about the ins and outs of Scrum or any other framework kind of a thing. I just kind of find myself going like, I don't know, how do we talk to people? Like, I mean, Gifford just said like leadership or whatnot. Like there's a ton of work that can be done in that area. I don't know what that means. But I know there's a ton of work to get done. So I just want to explore that more. So, to the listeners out there, if you have ideas about books or people to talk to, like, let us know. When podcasts kind of reach this kind of age, They can either go back through the list of speakers or the interviewees. Like we could go back through those people again, and that's fine. I'd love to talk to people that we've had again because we've had some amazing guests. Or we could go another direction, which is new people. And I don't know. I'm kind of interested in that. So let us know.
Yeah, go left. Andy Clef.
So I'm doing a personal life reset in the next 12 months. I got my butt off the couch in April and have been running regularly, and I'll be doing my first half marathon in a couple of weeks, middle of November. And where it goes after that, I don't know. It's been an interesting journey for me.
Paul.
Well, as far as Agile Uprising goes, we've been doing some experiments outside of the podcast, and hat tip Colleen really put some energy into Ask Me Anything, which we've got going on right now. We've got some amazing people coming on to Ask Me Anything. I like that, and I like just looking at things outside of the podcast. I think as time goes on, we are seeing more podcasts, not just in the Agile space, but just in general. Like there's just an abundance of possible content. There are other ways we can express our interest in this space and to collaborate in this space. So I'd like to continue to explore that.
Nice. Me, I think it's the, and I know we bandied this around last year, but I really want to dig into it this year. It's the series I'm trying to put together on the scaling frameworks that are out there. I think that, we talk about technology is eating the world and Agile is eating the world, and right behind that, it's safe is eating the world. But I think there's a lot of knowledge to be gained by some of the other stuff that's out there. And I think all of us as intelligent practitioners, we should be looking at the other options because it's just another thing that goes in your toolkit. So I'm really looking forward to digging into some of the frameworks that are not safe. Not to say it's safe is a bad thing, but that's what we all have. I personally have the most experience with. I'm looking forward to cracking open some of the stuff in large-scale Scrum and Discipline Agile and finding how some of those tools work best in an enterprise, because I really do think the future is going to be some sort of hybrid portmanteau of grabbing all the pieces that work and kludging it together, as opposed to, by the book application of some process and
the meta framework. I mean, we've been
I was
talking
gonna
about
say,
that.
that was podcast 1, right, Kev?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, Jay and I, the game of scaling, we've batted around that idea, that scaling series. I mean, I'd like to get back to doing a couple series a year. But ideally we should probably start trying to descale the enterprise instead of scaling agility.
Right. That's the blog post I've been after you for 18 months to write, and you keep disappearing to some foreign land and you're never around.
I can't help it that I've almost spent 3 months of my life in India this year. I really can't.
Yes, you can. You actually can help that.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up and take it home, because I know Brad is already into tomorrow, so I think we're encroaching on his lunchtime. Any final thoughts? Brad Stokes.
No final thoughts. It's been a great year. Looking forward to the year to come. Absolutely love being part of this.
Thank you.
That's it.
Mr. Cusack.
I was not ready for you to go to me, Hershko. I think that for me, man, people over process. I love this group of folks more than anything. It's the reason I stick around and continue to push forward is just because of the people on this call. I love you all. You're the best. Next year's going to be great.
Troy.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh my God! I just had a flashback to every bad conference call I had today. But keep going.
I don't want my background noise to be. Looking forward to. Well, I'm looking forward to working with all you guys, recording some new podcasts, and seeing where we can take this thing. I think, like Merman was mentioning, beyond Scrum, beyond our typical Agile stuff, and how can we think outside of the box? That's what I'm interested in this year.
Merman.
Focus more on the left side of the manifesto, not the right. We kind of focus on the right too much. Just saying.
Fair enough. Gifford?
I don't know.
Yeah, I second Dick. I don't know.
I'm lost. I mean, I'm
tired.
Everything that I gravitate towards is literally stuff that just kind of makes me mad. And I watch the Twitter rants around product management and product development, and it's like we're on these rants, and organizations are just that dumb that they don't get it. But like, this is all common sense. And so it's. I think that we might need to dive into that space a little bit, but I mean, we've really barely even nicked the surface. We've really only, big name guests. We've only had one guest repeat. No, two guests with Lisa. Lisa and James Grenning are the only two people we've repeated, and we've barely tapped the bucket of people to really talk to and dig into. So
Andrew Leff.
Yeah, I mean, I can pretty much echo what everyone else has said, but to continue to be a better coach to the engagement of not only this community, but outside of just our pocket of the board members, but also getting more participation from our listeners and people that post on our forum, so on the board. So I would love to see more participation from the community to help us continue to build content and engagement.
Last but not least, Mr. Elia.
I like the engagement. That's a great thing. I guess parting thought is every once in a while I will say we're sorry for the profanity, but never sorry for the Son and Air music at the beginning and the end. Y'all can go.
Yeah.
I love that he's like.
I love that music. When I first met this troupe, I flew into Philly to meet a lot of you face to face. Cusack, I asked him on the way out, I'm like, man, I don't have the music. I need the music for takeoff. And he shot it to me on the phone, and I played it when the plane took off from Philly. Absolutely love it.
All right. Well, on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank all of our listeners for listening, your continued support, your continued feedback, the topics of the conversation of the coalition, the feedback emails, the conversations back and forth on Twitter. We all appreciate it. And I want to thank all the board members for taking time out of their busy lives to come in tonight and record this conversation. And we look forward, I think we're speaking on behalf of everyone here, I think we look forward to another successful year. And we're looking forward to what the future has in hold for us. So thanks again for listening. Good night, and we'll see you soon.